Welcome to our little cozy living room here. Isn't this cozy? It's cozy. We're all sitting around our kitchen table. And we're gonna be talking today for the next hour or so. Specifically, the next 10, what's in store for retail spaces over the next 10 years or so. Last couple of years we did these discussions and they ended up being kind of just commiserations. Steve, you were on one of them a couple of years ago, and it's, oh, woe is us and the world is tricky. But we want to look ahead this time around. And we're going to launch straight into it, actually. And we're going to start with some introductions so that you know who everybody up here is. Jeff, I'll start it off with you. Why don't you tell us who you are, where you're from, a bit about your background, and then also what your current focus is right now.
Okay. My name is Jeff Gray. I'm the Vice President of Store Development for Hibbett Sports and City Gear. We purchased City Gear in 2018. I have been with Hibbett for 32 years. Was in operations for 10 years and then been in real estate and then took over the entire store development department in 2020. Talking about commiserating and how things have struggled since COVID. Actually, since COVID, it's probably been our best 3 years ever. We really used that time to really push forward the things that we did well, and it's really made for huge numbers for us. So we're a growing company. We're opening 50 to 60 stores a year. Right now, we're in the middle of a big remodel project, trying to redevelop our stores, using this time that sales have been so good to really put back in the stores. We're going to remodel 80 to 100 stores a year. So that's our big focus going forward, is adding stores and then remodeling the existing store base that we have. So we're based out of Birmingham, Alabama, and we have 1,150 stores, I think. So.
Excellent. You're also a competitive chess player, is that right?
I am terrible at chess. I think what we said on the call was
Did I get my notes wrong?
I enjoy playing tennis. So chess, tennis. Some of the people I play against may think I'm playing chess, but
tennis, chess, chess while playing tennis. I'm sorry, that virtual calls, right? Jeff, thanks so much. Danny, on to you next.
Awesome. So I'm Danny Gallagher. I am the Vice President of Planning, Design, and Construction for CVS Health. So I joined CVS about 15 years ago as a project manager and kind of came up through the ranks. I've been on the construction and real estate side, and right now lead 3 distinct teams. My background is on the architecture side, so I like to say, prior to this career, I was actually practicing architecture, and on the design side, still in retail, but now I get to apply all that knowledge a little bit differently. And CVS Health, we're in the midst of really redefining who we are. We purchased Aetna in 2018, I think it was, and added that to sort of our base on the healthcare side. And so as we look at what we are as a pharmacy, as your neighborhood drugstore, we're really looking at how do we partner in and move us into that healthcare vertical. And so there's a lot of new efforts, and we're piloting across the board on primary care, bringing primary care in, really expanding on what's our clinical base, and then looking at some of these other offerings as we look at to really solve what healthcare looks like in the U.S. So we're busy. We got 10,000 locations out there, and we're keeping all of them operating. We're operating inside other retailers. We're really just changing the dynamic and now the healthcare side of it. So
wonderful, great. Thank you for the overview. Thank you, Steve.
I'm Steve LaMontagne. So I'm the Vice President of Portfolio Optimization at Sprouts. I've been there about a year. Like Tony Roller, I've been in retail since I was 16. So prior to, I was with Walgreens, where I led design, engineering, construction, facilities, and space. Spent time at Amazon, and then lots of the food retailers, so Ahold USA, Albertsons, and whatnot. So big focus for Sprouts is both new store growth, right? So we're growing at about 10% new store growth a year. Just opened our 400th store, so about 35 to 40 stores a year. Big focus there. I'm not on the new store side. I'm not on the new prototype side. The CEO and the Chief Strategy Officer had me join to really focus on the existing portfolio. And so if you think about it as a 20-year chain, we want to make sure we're remaining customer relevant. We're making the proper reinvestments back into the existing fleet, and that's really the focus for myself and my team. Very new role.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Heidi.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Heidi Blasey. I'm here from Solidcore, which is a boutique fitness brand based in Washington, D.C. We are probably on the earlier side of the panel here. We're at about 110 locations and not quite 10 years old. I've been with them for about half of that time, coming up on 5 years. Similar to Danny, my background is in design and creative, so kind of came up through that arm of things. Where we're focusing right now, I would say, is a little bit on the growth. On a base of 110 studios, we are growing at about 25 a year. And so with that comes kind of, where do we take the DNA of the brand of being scrappy, early stage growth, and merge it into being, one of the slightly more adult companies with process and scale, and how do you marry up that drive and that scrappiness that comes from the earlier stage with the discipline and process as we get bigger and the teams get larger and our footprint gets larger. So that's a big focus. Interestingly, we are coming up on that first round of lease renewals, and so things like studio refreshes and portfolio optimization is definitely coming into play for us right now as we think through, kind of that next stage of our company.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for, we didn't have to play the Oscar music. You didn't take too long. Thank you. Look, we are going to jump into the future in a second, but, Jeff, something you said when we were planning this is, the next 3 or 4 years are going to be just as quick, if not quicker than the last 3 or 4 years. So just want to lay the groundwork in terms of where we are right now. How are you guys different in your roles compared to where you were in 2019? I'm just going to throw that out to anyone.
I'll start. He threw my name out. So, like I said, the next 3 years are going to probably move faster than the last 10 have moved. Since COVID started, it has totally changed the way we look at it. We went from being a sporting goods store selling bats, balls, shirts, and shoes to really totally evaluating that, and we're more of a fashion retailer now. We have some stores that have zero equipment in it. We really tried to focus on what the customer's looking for, how they want to get it. Online sales have really changed how you do a lot of things. And, for us, we could go to a small town in North Carolina, whatever. We're the only game in town. So if we didn't have the bat you need, or if we didn't have the size of shoe you need, the customer just would buy the next size or the next bat or whatever. Well, as online took over, everybody has a competitor. It's just on their phone. So we really had to really try to think about what the customer wants, what they want to get in the store that day. And so that really became our focus. So we're really trying to utilize everything from our group with store development is, everything that we do to the store, how does it optimize the customer experience that day, and how does it tie back into the online presence. So really want to have, they're all tied together. So if the customer's buying it online, we want them to pick it up in the store if they can. If they return it, we want them to return it in the store if they can. So we give them incentives to do that. So as we design the store, as we build the store, we're taking all those things into consideration. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. It used to just be 3-4 years ago, it was all about just knocking it out, right? Like, this is the next thing we have in front of us. And now I spend a lot more time on planning. We're sitting back going, what's the strategy? How are we aligning this forward? What's that experience going to look like? How does it change how we spend our capital? And I think that changes, we've stood up 2 pretty dynamic teams to really support what that construction execution looks like. And one is capital planning, right? It's in front of it, and it's everything from how we manage those vendors, and all the things that have happened to us over the last couple of years have to really become a key component of what that planning effort looks like. And then you pull in that partnership with design, and you say, this is how we're going to move it forward. And then the execution arm can take it. So it's not just here's another 100, but now how are we going to attack that 100, and how is it going to make more sense? And capital's limited.
Yeah.
At least it is for me.
Yeah, no.
You guys got a money tree.
Yeah, plenty of money. And then what you build, you got to make it flexible so that it's not like we're going through a remodel project right now. We we had really never remodeled stores. We had refreshed stores. We talked about it. We replaced one rack with a newer rack. We replaced one fixture with a newer fixture. Now it's a total design. So to get through 1,000 stores is a lot of capital. So by the time I get finished, the ones I've already done are going to need to be redone again. So we got to make sure that it's a little more flexible so we're not just having to start over every time, because you don't have the capital to do that. So you can't catch up.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, size and scale matters, is what I found in my career, right? So, I've lived in Danny's world, right? It's a big machine, right? And it's time to redefine and figure out what you're going to be for the next generation. I made a conscious choice to move to a smaller company who's really customer focused and who can be a bit more nimble, right? So, but it also sort of establishes a new time to think about it, right? Coming from a team where I had a big team, big staff, sort of this internal group, and what you use for external vendors was sort of predefined, right? You never wanted to upset that apple cart. Now I've got the choice to try to figure out what are those vendor partners that are out there? What's that right balance, if you will, in terms of internal and third-party resources to try to get the job done? And that's really what I found has been different over the last 2 to 3 years, more so than any other time in my career, sort of post-COVID, is to sort of redefine what that is. And those partnerships and those relationships, as Danny mentioned, are absolutely critical in terms of the success to move forward.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to, being on the smaller side is you can be very nimble. We're more the speedboat than the cruise ship. And so how that has changed over the last couple of years is really thinking through what's the right level of risk tolerance. You can move the ship very, very quickly if you wanted to in the size of company that I'm with. But sometimes that's not always the right answer. And so really figuring out where's that risk tolerance, how can we look 1 to 5 years in the future and kind of figure out where we're making our bets, where we're taking the risks, and where we're pulling it in tight. I think the last couple of years for our company in particular, we pulled it in really tight, and we're like, this is working. Don't fuck it up, just keep doing what we're doing. And then now it's like, okay, it's worked, we have a little bit of breathing room, where can we play around a little bit more now and let it get creative again, which is really exciting.
It's really interesting point. So, I came into Sprouts and said, okay, well, what's this portfolio optimization thing, right? And the executives were like, well, we kind of wrote it down, but you get to redefine what this is. We have sort of this master vision, but help us put some meat on the bone, if you will. So, I go in, right, I've got all this experience, I'm thinking I've got this list, and I go in with the CEO, and here's all the things that we're gonna do and that we're gonna accomplish, and he sits there and he's like, no. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why did you hire me? And the whole notion was really kind of focus on what's working, and make sure that you don't get caught up doing 100 little things that don't add up to nothing, right? Focus on what the brand is, what the customer expects. Yes, take us down a journey, push us a bit, but really don't take your eye off the prize on a defined model.
Right. We were talking about that a bit before, right, in terms of getting that right mix right and then having C-suite buy-in too, and Tony was talking about that
And this morning.
How do you sort of toe that line and push the innovation and get them to see what needs to happen apart from making iterative changes?
Yeah, for us, it's really interesting, right? Because we have all of these different pilots that we're working on, right? We're trying to move into this healthcare sector. And so to your point about being nimble, right? We're always trying to be nimble, and you present these things up and you're trying to really create something new. But at the same time, you've got to get speed to market, you've got to get buy-in at the top, and they're looking for what is that return going to be? How fast can we actually get there? And so, there are times we present something up, I was just laughing outside, I've got to get information so that they can get it to the board on what we're going to spend. And they're not looking to see how great, they just want that information. They've got to buy in on this is my return, and they've got to prove out that capital spend is in the right spot. So we're balancing that with but this will be really great. Just give it time, right? And give me a little bit more money, and it's going to cost. But so yeah, we don't always get the buy-in at the top. I found that funny this morning when she said it, when Tony was like, yeah, they kind of looked at me and went, okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to kick it up a notch now. We know where we're at. We know where we've come from the last few years. 2033, Kid Rock is president. The way that we think about iPhones and Alexa is that they are relics of the past. We now have brain interfaces, which makes it possible for us to talk telepathically, rendering this kind of talking obsolete, and conferences like this obsolete. Aliens are real, and Elon Musk has migrated to Mars to create an army of Tesla bots. So that's where we're at. Maybe some of those things will happen, maybe not. But what we're going to spend the rest of the time doing now is we're going to break it into two parts. We're going to look at, how is the role of store development going to change over the next decade, and also how is the store experience going to be changing. Where I want to, and I'm going to jump around to different themes. Where I want to start with is the store development experience. Last year, we ran a breakout session where we were talking about hybrid work models. And that was interesting at that point in time because the people were saying, we're just exhausted having to do work this way, and the onus is on the managers to make it work in a hybrid world. Who's working remotely at the moment? Can I just show his hands? Who's fully remote? All right, who's under some kind of hybrid model? All right, anybody back in the office full time? Interesting, pretty big spread. So, to you guys, how do you feel about how it is right now, and what would you like to see moving forward in terms of the way that we work and operate our teams? I'm throwing it open.
Yeah, right. I'll jump in. So we are, so my teams are remote. We've always been remote, so that's kind of an easy thing. Even before COVID, we just carried on. As a company, as an organization, CVS went remote, everybody was remote, and then we started pulling people back in. And so I think they really struggled over the last, I'd say 6 to 8 months to really make the commitment. And so now they've just kind of mandated it, right? Everybody, September 4th or 5th or whatever it was, everybody in hybrid, 3 days a week, you got to be in the office. And so there's a lot of pushback. There's like, what does this look like? And I think though for organizations, right, it has to become a little bit more, it can't be forced, right? It just has to be the way we work, and we've all got to be nimble and creative enough to say, like, it's okay for you to be on the team site, and I'll be face-to-face, and we'll collaborate, and then we'll move into the next meeting, and it'll be whatever. But it has changed. I mean, it has absolutely changed the way we do business. I take less from the road, or take less meetings from the road. I end up doing more at my desk because I got to be on Teams and try to get my face on camera and be one-on-one with the team. So I almost feel more connected to some of them just because we're in that virtual platform. But it's hard because as you go out, then it's less phone calls for some odd reason. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Everyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, I would almost draw the parallel. So we're hybrid. We're in the office 3 days a week, remote or flexible the other two. And I think for us, it's really much like when we talk about retail. You have to have a reason to come in and make it worth the effort of offsetting the commute, offsetting the productivity. It's like, what are the experiences during those in-person days that people aren't going, well, I could have just had 2 extra hours of my day. And that translates to retail and to our stores. It's like, what is the experience that we're offering that makes people not question, like they'd actually rather be here than not here. We're actually going through the very fun exercise, if anyone has led this project for your team, of designing our new HQ. Which is the most fun and most challenging task, I would say. But it's also really fun. We had a teammate when we were kind of visioning, like, what do we want the office to accomplish? And they called it good hair, which everyone kind of questioned, and our CEO's bald, and he's like, is that a hit at me? But it was really just the idea that we want to create an environment where people want to show up as their best self. That they're like excited. They're like, this is the outfit that I'm going to wear, and this is how I'm going to style, and this is how I'm going to show up because I want to be that way for my colleagues. And so it doesn't mean in the office 5 days a week. It doesn't mean showing up just to like clock in, clock out. But how do you both physically curate that environment and culturally curate that environment that people don't question the time commitment of making the effort to come into the office?
As our company, we were 100% at the office. We had a 80-year-old CEO, so he was seeing what time you got there and what time you left, and COVID totally changed that. And I had never even used Teams until COVID hit. I mean, we had it on our computers, but nobody used it. My group kind of oversees the facilities, so the headquarters. We didn't have enough meeting rooms because everybody met in person, and all of that has changed. We're a hybrid now. You can work up to 60% remote. Even when people are in the offices, we meet on Teams. We don't necessarily go to the meeting room. So we've lost a little bit of what you want. So I tend to make my team show up in person if they're there. But it's totally changed. Talking about headquarters, we've thrown out ideas about it. We needed more offices. We needed more cubes for employees. Now half the cubes are empty. So anytime we do something, we're getting rid of cubes and we're adding, stand-up locations and, for people when they do come in, they don't necessarily go to the same spot every time. They go to what's available and things like that. So yeah,
hoteling concept.
And I think it can make the office a lot more cooler, a lot, better hair, like you said. And we can make it more enjoyable. We can use the space better. Our lunchroom is, there's 10 people at lunch sitting in the lunchroom. That needs to be a workspace. You can eat, you can have a TV, you can meet with people. So there's a lot of ways you can, reevaluate that with this hybrid model. So.
Right.
It's interesting. You talk about, how do you toe the line? And it's the same thing on this, right? Even myself, I sort of feel a little different, right? I miss the days. If we think about what this, most folks in this room do in terms of the design and planning aspect, right? I miss we're in the office, we're going to roll up our sleeves, it's going to be on paper with markers, and we're going to do some sort of design charrette or collaboration, right? So yeah, there's tools to do a bit of that, right? Like technology tools, but there's something about the cultural aspect of bringing the team together, reading people's body language, eye movements, where they're kind of sort of contributing. But conversely, we've other times, quite frankly, in the office where we come together for a team meeting or a staff meeting, and my team's like, can we just go back to our space because we really need our dual or triple monitors so we can reference the data that you're questioning us on? And we literally end up going back to individual spaces and collaborating using technology and tools. So it's really sort of this what are we trying to solve for at that very moment kind of thing. Yeah.
Just to jump on that, just really quick, we had this come up just really recently where we were trying to drive an in-person meeting, and you talk about the future, right? Like talk about where this is going. And we've had a series of phone calls, Teams meetings on this one particular issue. We know that if we put those people in a room together, you're going to probably solve it in an hour, hour and a half. I think we've had 4 one-hour meetings on the call, and you can't, first you got to rehash where you started from, and then, right? So there is this, you got to get to this movement where, like, it's fine to pull it together, right? And there's times when that's going to be perfectly acceptable, and then there's times when you can be at your desk, right? Like, but it's got to become more natural. Right now, I'm being forced in this direction doesn't work because now I'm on a Teams call at my desk. All that's still happening.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a flexible, fluid future. I guess just quickly to recap that, is it better or worse after what we've been through? Would you say, just real quick?
I'd say different. I don't know if it's better or worse.
Parts of it are better, but
sure.
You lose a lot of that. Like she said, you would go to a meeting and you put on a board, you finish it. Where now it's, let's do all this, now we'll come together next week and we'll finish it.
Right.
So you get a little bit of that, and people they kind of go to, let's do teams, so we don't all have to be here. So.
Let's move to building teams now. A lot of turbulence over the last few years. We got rid of a bunch of people. We brought them back because production was up again. And, so how do you guys think about building teams these days? How do you adapt for the future in case, heaven forbid, something else happens, the aliens come? And I guess how do you motivate them? How are you running your teams?
We let a lot. We didn't let anybody go, but we kind of naturally, as people resigned or did this or that, we didn't replace them. And then as growth started pulling back up, we really kind of went to almost like a hybrid thing. We would hire one person, but we would, 2 of our designers that left, we're contracting them. So they're drawing for us. They're doing that stuff. It's cheaper than using some of the outside firms. They've done our work before. So we went to more brokers on the real estate side and less permanent employees. So I think like everything else, it's kind of a hybrid model. Because, you can hire 25 people and then You know, COVID hits again, you got to let 15 go. And
Yo, don't say
that's
that.
the last thing.
It's okay. Yeah.
That's the last thing you want to do is to,
The
is to go
aliens
back
will
to
not bring COVID, it'll bring something else.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Steve, to that point, following on from that, you are sort of more of a proponent these days of, and what you're doing right now, sort of strengthening your vendor networks, right? Relying on like an external team. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, well, you know, coming from a different place where, you know, we're just standing up what we call portfolio optimization, and I'd love to say that I've got it fully defined in my mind in terms of what it looks like at scale and what it looks like in sort of, you know, full gear. Haven't figured it out. So it's much easier for me to figure out what is that core network of folks that I have internal on the team, and what are the skill sets that are absolutely fundamental that I know that will need to be there day in and day out, to Jeff's point, right? But really leveraging the vendor networks where you can leverage the expertise of the vendors as well, and inviting them to the table. So it's really interesting, the conversations that I'm having with these third-party vendors. It's like I want to feel like the folks that you're assigning to our business are part of my own team. Not necessarily, I don't care what their business card says. I want to feel like they could be badged, in this case, Sprouts, and no one would know the difference. So whether you know, my team's interviewing folks that are going to come on as part of the third party, but making sure that they feel culturally embedded within the team, and quite frankly, bringing vendor partners to the table that historically wouldn't have to do that. We talk about supply chain, right? Big deal, right? It's this whole thing of like, oh, we're going to order stuff and it's going to show up when it shows up. Well, that doesn't bode well for the budget. It doesn't bode well for the schedule, right? So inviting a logistics partner as a key vendor to the table on the weekly calls, and they're part of the success of getting it done. I would have never thought to bring a logistics partner, a trusted logistics partner, to the table, who is sort of informing, right, the installation team exactly what time that particular case is going to show up, and when they're going to have it there, and how this handoff's going to happen, kind of thing. So that's just one example within that. You know, there's a lot of third-party program management firms that are out there now, right? There's a few here in the building today. They can be key as well, right? They've got really experienced folks who have already stubbed their toes on lots and lots of projects. Having that expertise at the table becomes critical as well.
Yeah, I would say we are big on really thinking of our partners as an extension of the team. You know, we're recently going through succession planning and 9-box and evaluating our internal talent. And we go so far as to put our close vendor partners on a 9-box like that. How are we thinking about how they'll scale up with us? Are they, you know, do they have the potential? Do they have the performance? And being very strategic about, there is that level of ownership that no matter how close a partner can be, you still need in certain critical roles that, like, this will hurt me personally if I like don't get this right. Not personally, but you know what I mean. And so really just thinking through, how do you bring people along and like truly give them the visibility, transparency, the partnership to be an extension of your team, and pair that with the critical roles that you need internal to support that, and keep them motivated. You know, it's like,
That's the key, the engagement piece of it,
The
right? Like
engagement,
how do you level up with that engagement constantly? And that, I mean, we're constantly looking at that, right? So you have all of these assets, these incredible, talented individuals that are part of the teams, but if you don't keep them highly engaged, if you don't make them a key component to what you're doing, you're not going to be able to keep, you know, scaling or keep them engaged or keep them, you know, at the table with you. So there's a big piece of that, internal and external.
yeah, we make them do group sweats. It's really fun.
You're leading the
construction
entire
team
workout.
right there.
Sorry, did you say
I have not tried that.
group squats?
Group squats.
Oh, right, okay,
Sweat.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Heidi, it reminds me of something you brought up on a call that we had just with that, you know, quality control. How you know, it went sort of, you've noticed it decreasing. How do you manage that, and how do you think about that moving forward? And it's related to all that, right?
Yeah, and I guess that does go back to the team dynamics. You know, I think a couple years ago you could sort of set things in motion and trust that it's happening, and maybe do like spot checking to verify, but that doesn't seem to be the environment that we're operating in right now. There's a lot more checking to make sure things are going the way that you thought they would. So it does mean more headcount. You know, unfortunately, you can't just have one person doing, you know, 10 projects, 15 projects. that's kind of doubled, I would say, from at least for solidcore where we were a couple years ago to where we are today. We do need more bodies for the number of studios that we're doing. Because it's just, yes, we can talk about the Wild West and the, everything that has been the last few years, but it's so critical that we are keeping a closer track on projects to make sure that they don't go off track in a way that was not the case a couple years ago, at least for us.
I'm just cognizant of the time here. One thing I want to ask about, we opened the conference today with AI and the impact that that's going to have. Just a show of hands again, I know Melissa asked before, but is anyone actively using these kind of tools to enhance their work? And yeah, okay. And you can be honest, show of other hands, who feels completely overwhelmed by it and has no idea how to get in? Thanks, Jeff. Get into it. Yeah.
Thanks, yes.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this open to anybody. How do you feel like this is going to revolutionize the way that you work moving forward? Any ideas? Or you?
I don't know how it's going to revolutionize, but the more you see, it's going to. You got to get involved and you got to figure it out. So, other departments in our corporation have started to use it. I know our marketing, our online stuff, do some things with it, but it's so far above what we're at. We're so busy with what we're doing. We've not really put any focus to it, but we know we need to.
Yeah, we use virtual surveying, right? Like we're trying to use it to streamline our ordering process. We're trying to stay in front of it as to keeping track of the fleet, right? How many locations do we have this versus that? So there's efficiencies with what we're using it for. The company as a whole uses it, you get automated text messages when your scripts are ready, or you've got interaction, like it'll pop up if you've, I think if you've said like, I need aspirin, it comes up with a coupon and here you go get Tylenol is on sale today or whatever. So, there is that component where it's interacting with us. I don't know for each of us, like in our respective roles, I think more and more we're trying to find efficiencies with it, right? But it's not so much about is it doing our job or is it, I think is it making our world more efficient or more streamlined? Is it helping us progress with what we've got to do? So for us, it helps. I hope it's more economical when I think like we're not ordering things that we don't need anymore, or it's able to read the docs, the design docs, and then we're much more efficient in that process. But
yeah, for me, in a previous life, it'd gotten to a point where things like SketchUp and augmented reality. So I would throw the glasses on senior execs within the business when you're trying to get them to get to that aha moment, especially on new concepts, right? It's really hard. You can do so many renderings and so many plans, and it's going to be like Tony said this morning. It's kind of like, yeah, I think so, but I'm not really sure. So you'd throw glasses on, and so I've come from that world. In the world that I'm at now, it's more around things like using Power BI, so you can have data inputs, so you can get to that point of how do we make some decisions around what customers are really telling us that comes into the data to figure out what that next, like, oh, why don't we explore new territories, if you will. So it really, I think, depends upon the maturity of the business and at what stage they're at, right? So, Danny talks about sort of redefining their business model, right? Like Heidi's been talking about, like, what does the next 5 look like, right? But a bit of that speedboat kind of thing, staying nimble, but where does it make sense to use it, depending upon the application?
Yeah, and I think where does it make sense to use it is, for us, very much thinking like back end. But if anything, what we've learned is the personal engagement in the studio is something that can't be replaced and matched. I look at our peer set in the fitness space, and those who pivoted over to at home and a digital world, it worked for some, but for most, it didn't work out really well. And so, if anything, we're really doubling down on that personal experience, working with a coach individually. What does it feel like when you come into the studio? Somebody knowing your name, knowing about you is so important. And yes, that can be assisted on the back end with some efficiencies, but I do think for that last touch point in our industry, it's so important to keep it personal and human.
Which takes us nicely into now looking more at the evolution of the store. And you know, something that resonated with me last night with Roy Wood Jr. was this, you know, making stores human, you know, and where does automation sort of become too much? Again, how do we toe that line? And today we sort of had that juxtaposition with AI and then Dix, where, you know, Lee was saying, no robots here. So how do you guys think about that? How does that resonate with you in terms of the stores that we're building? How do we keep it human? How do we embrace the right amount of automation to make store experiences feel like something that we want to go to?
I think the automation is going to have to drive some of that personal experience. And I think what I mean by that is, you know, as we look at the models, the pilots that we're testing right now, where we're bringing healthcare into the store, and it's, you know, it's this clinical environment. You've got primary care, you've got urgent care, some of these minute clinic health hubs, and you've got the pharmacy experience, and then of course our front store. But as the patient or customer comes in, you've got technology sort of maybe, you know, spurring them, driving them, inviting them. But there's these touch points that have to happen for the experience, right? This is usually, you know, you're either dealing with a sick patient or an elderly patient, or, you know, I mean, you've got these different environments, these different customer bases, and they're all going to react a little bit different. I don't know that some of our, you know, focus around Medicaid, Medicare, as we try to solve for that, is going to respond to the technology the same way that somebody, you know, of a younger generation is going to come in and they're looking for, you know, they want to get on their phone and double check the pricing on 3 different health elements that they're going to buy, right? And then picked up their vitamins and out the door they go. So it's I think one is going to have to partner with the other as we go through it, and we're going to have to change the way it looks, right? You come into the store, you experience it in a certain way, and then there's that engagement that goes from, like, as you move through the store.
Yeah, and I would say on the touch points, it's so important for us in really editing our efforts to those important touch points, where, you know, we can't do all things for everyone in every inch of our studio, but where are those important moments to get it right so that it does meet the customer or the client where they're looking for that touch point.
Yeah, we think it can, like for us, it's a little more simpler. Is, you know, we have a standard register in the middle of the store. You know, we think at some point we can get rid of that. We can get these customers, you know, we hire a lot of 18, 19-year-old employees, and they end up at the register. And, you know, we've got apps on the phone to find shoes and stuff like that. And they start to rely on that a little bit too much and start getting stuck behind the register. We think we can possibly get rid of that register, get them out on the floor with the customer, you know, finish the sale right there with you, and then move on to the next customer a little quicker. So we think it can, if we can train them correctly, it can improve the interaction with the customer, even with the technology on the phone or something like that. So we're really having to work with them real hard, because, you know, one of our things was, you ask for a shoe, you ask for a size, we go to the back room, we don't have that shoe, we don't have that size, they're supposed to be bringing another size or another shoe out. Well, now they check it on the phone and they say, hey, we don't have that size. So they really have to work on keeping that experience, you know, even with the technology. So it can be done. You just have to, I mean, you're having to retrain people to how to sell shoes.
You know, what's the customer benefit, you know, through all of this, right? And we have to keep putting that through the filter and the lens. And I don't think Amazon's in the house, but, you know, my time at Amazon, it was hyper focused on the technology, right? Like, how do you make it easy for customers, right? It was less sort of that emotional intelligence piece that we heard this morning. I love that phrase, right? It's how do you find that balance between AI and emotional intelligence? And, you know, we see a company like Amazon, as smart as they are, and kudos to them, they're sort of retrenching, right? Taking a step back and, wait a minute, maybe we didn't quite hit it on store experience. Maybe we're selling Me Too products, right? Like, what's the real purpose for that? So yeah, it's cool to have the technology. I can wave my hand and, like, I don't need to go to the checkout and things like that if I choose to do that. But there may be certain days that I actually want to interact with that customer. I mean, my most recent experience was this weekend. I went to Ace Hardware to buy 2 bags of salt for, like, your, you know, salt generator kind of thing. And I said to the woman I paid and that kind of thing, I don't know how much I paid for it. I don't know if I overpaid, underpaid. I have no idea. But the woman at the register, so I said, I'll just drive up and I'll just pick it up. It's on the curb. And she said, she literally put her hand on me, like on my wrist, and she said, oh no, she said, you should take advantage of our exceptional customer service. We'll have one of the guys just put it in your car for you. That's what's resonated in my head, right? Nothing else, not the price, nothing else like that. That's that emotional intelligence, because there was this bond and that connection, and I'm always going to buy salt from that Ace Hardware every single time I need it now. She's got a customer for life to sell me bags of salt. Think about it.
Ace.
Something so simple.
Yeah, there you go. That's such a great example. And tying in with what you were saying, Jeff, just now, you know, the employee experience, the store associate experience. There was a recent study out from a workforce management platform that in the next 12 months, around 62% of hourly retail employees plan to leave their jobs, and 64% of those plan to leave the industry entirely. Do you guys think about that in terms of what that experience looks like from the store employee experience? I mean, let's be honest, it's not the most riveting of jobs, right? So, especially Danny, you know, we were talking about loss prevention as well, and it's not a, you know, it may not be as appealing moving forward. So how do you guys think about that when you're designing spaces? And
We have we talked a little bit about it before we got here, and I've recently, you know, I'm touring new stores, and I go in, I see the self checkouts. We talked a little bit the self checkouts, right? Like, there's no experience now. You just got to get yourself out of the store, and then you've got the greeter or whomever that person is. It's also the person standing behind the register, making sure you actually check yourself out. And but then there's just no engagement, you know. They're not necessarily coming in. I mean, they say hi to you when you walk in, and they do help you if you get stuck. But, you know, can I take you to aisle 4, where whatever it is that you're looking for is? Or so it's not surprising that they're wanting to leave. I do think you create this great environment. I think that's part about what we need to do is, and I think you said it right, where we've got to retrain them, right? They have to be a part of the experience now, and they have to understand how important they are, and they have to take ownership of it. And you know, and then we'll see some dynamic with it, because I think that's, you know, to your point about the lady who's like, hold on a second, like, let me show you this, right? It's the coffee barista who talks to you and says, I know you're, you know, I mean, I just got a latte over there, and he was like, let me do this for you, let me make it, you know. I was like, I love this guy. So it's all about that experience.
No, and I'll talk about CVS for a second in a positive way. I stopped off last week at a store on my way to work, 7 o'clock in the morning. I had a headache. I had to stop and get some aspirin, and went in the store, and, you know, they've got the self-checkouts. But the manager was standing up there, and I had an Auburn football polo on, and he went out of his way as I'm checking out to ask me what I thought about the game. And it makes a world of difference. Like, you know, for our stores, you know, employees typically like working in our stores. We're selling Nike shoes, we're selling Jordans, but we're hiring 18 and 19-year-olds. So it's, you know, you guys that have worked in the retail, you either love it or you hate it. There's no in between in retail. And so I think the technology will draw some people in and make them want to stay with you. And some, it's not going to matter what you do. So they're going to work there, and then they're going to move on. So, but I'll never forget that guy. He talked to me about my thing, and I was like, okay, I'm buying my aspirin from this guy. You know, so it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference.
anything to add there?
Yeah, our model's a little different, and so trying to kind of piece in here. For us, the talent is everything. I mean, in most of the time, when you sign up for a class, you walk into the studio, you're only interacting with one employee in the building, and that's your coach for the class. And so our training teams, our recruitment teams are the largest teams that we have in the company. It's so critical. And I think what we're focusing on now is just making sure, I mean, that's a lot to ask of one person, to be an amazing coach, to deliver this client experience, to inform and educate on the product, to also then sell on the membership package. And so we're really just trying to figure out what are the things that we can pull away so that the coaches can focus on the parts that they love, so that they stay with us longer, so that they're really willing to relocate and take the experience to a new market as we're opening it up, and support them on the back end with other pieces, so that we can extend that tenure. But it is a little different. I mean, we are heavily part-time, And it's a significant investment for our team to bring on new members to train them up and everything. So it's critical to keep them longer than a 12-month stint.
Look, I'm going to throw it to you guys to see if you have any questions because we're running out of time real quickly. But just before I do that, real quick, I like to ask everybody usually, is there something about the industry, what you do, that pisses you off? Is there something that you wish, like, over the next 10 years would just, like, kind of disappear, something you didn't have to deal with, or a mindset that you would think is not helpful? Yeah, before I throw it to the audience.
Permitting. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, permitting is crazy. All the cities let everybody go when COVID happened, and then they either didn't hire them back or they hired less experienced people back. So, I mean, what used to take 30 days to get a permit now is 90, 150 days. And, permitting and inspections. We failed an inspection Friday night because we had a burglar bar on the back door. And he said, we have to take it off. We said, all right, we'll take it off. We were opening the next day. He said, no, you can't take it off now. Take it off. I'll be back on Monday. So I just think some of that, it's just who we've rehired in those industries is making it really tough.
Yeah, I'll second that. I don't even have to come up with a different one.
Yeah.
I've got as many stories along that, and then you add in, the boards and the health departments, and they just layer into the inspections. And by the time you've gone through all of those hoops, you've spent 6 months, and the speed to market is no more, right? You literally are planning 12 months out in front of you. And you can't test anything because you gotta keep moving, and somebody's trying to beat you to the market in it. So it was really the pain point. If I get rid of those permits, I'd be great. And
right. I can work on that for you. I'll
work at that.
I'll tick that box as well. But one of the things, it's a bit of what Tony said this morning, right? I mean, it feels like the generational gaps are getting closer and closer. I don't know if that makes sense, but like the expectations of sort of the future of the consumer, they're becoming, I don't know, more intelligent, more quickly, if you will, because of whether it's AI or whatnot, so they're more educated. And therefore, we have to iterate as a business. And so the stuff that pisses me off is when you're in an organization, it's like, we tried that in 1972. We tried that 5 years ago. And it's like, we just got to get to a point where we sort of strip that out because the rules are completely different. And how we redefine what the future retail is in all of our hands. And we have to strip out that kind of mentality for the people around the table.
I guess it's also, and I will add to the permit woes for sure.
Pile on, yeah.
Pile it on. I think it's also just so hard because it's the one, I can't say partner, but the one piece of the workflow that the incentives aren't aligned. Landlords, they want you to open. Architects and GCs, they want you to be done and move on to the next project. Suppliers want to sell you this thing. The cities don't care. The permit reviewers and the inspectors, they don't have the same sense of urgency or skin in the game or anything. And so, I don't know how you change that other than recognizing that it's the one piece in the cog that just isn't working in the same direction that we all are.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Mike, do we have any time for questions?
We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Thank you. Hi, I'm curious to hear a little bit about with the future of retail, specifically around sustainability. I think that's a huge part of where we're going as an industry, especially because we have such a huge footprint that we create in our buildings and our spaces, and then as an industry, how do we partner together as all of these people in here to be working towards the same goals so that we as a community are making progress? So how are your companies working on that, both individually and then as an industry?
I can start. And I will say we aren't far enough along to have a formal program around it. I think we're getting there, and it's huge for our client base. I mean, we tend to be in the millennial Gen Z world, and so it's a critical piece to show that customers are spending dollars in a place that is acting responsibly. So it's very top of mind. We don't have a formal program around it. I would say, if anything, it really has to do with not adding too much stuff to our build-outs, which seems kind of strange, but it's not layering on a lot of decoration. It's not layering on a lot of obsolete pieces, and so we aren't turning over refreshes and throwing away product and ripping wall coverings down and replacing it with something else on a regular basis. It's really being thoughtful. Is this material going to last, and both aesthetically and durability wise, for the duration of at least the first lease term, so that we aren't throwing things away? How are we making sure we're stripping out single-use plastics in our studios, so that those touch points that the client's experiencing show that we have some efforts? And I do think that we have some opportunity to kind of talk about the full story of how we're creating a healthy and sustainable environment within the studio.
Any other thoughts there, Robin?
I think in making smart choices around sustainability and making smart investments around sustainability, sort of there's this fine line, right? Because if you ask customers, sure, we want sustainable products. Are they willing to pay for it, especially in an age right now where they're penny pinching and average unit retails are up? Are they really going to pay the dollars for it, right? Like it becomes this fine line and this balance. So to me, it's about choices and really thinking through what level of sustainability, like what kind of sort of accreditation, if you will, do you want to have as an organization?
Yeah. Well, I'll just add real quick one thing so we have big company. We have a really robust ESG platform and a focus on it. But I don't think that means we figured it out. But one of the nice things that I do see us moving, it's not just about the product, and it's not just about the materials now. So we're really looking at that social piece as well. And so there's a big. My teams right now are focused on, can we take any of our dark locations and actually partner with the communities? Can we give back in other ways that kind of change the footprint of what that piece looks like? And so I think in order for us to really move it forward, it isn't just going to be, can we go to more sustainable materials, or can we get rid of the floor covering and just do concrete? But it's going to be these layering impacts that we have, and it's going to be on all ESG levels, not just the commitment to the sustainability piece.
Super important topic, and we have a deep dive later today to jump into that as well. But we are out of time right now. But hey, thank you so much for doing this and sitting around this table. Let's give them a round of applause.
Yes. Thank you guys so much.